If somebody asked you 10 years ago, what would revolution today look like to you? You would have deep racial divisions, media split down the middle, false information, narratives, rioting, looting, protests, an unwillingness of authorities to either deal with them or an inability to deal with them. We have some or all of those things going on.
I think we have to talk about McDonald's first. What really happened?
We get a call from an informant and says McDonald's Monopoly games are corrupted. There's a guy named Uncle Jerry who's arranging for winners and stealing the pieces. A lot of just nose to the grindstone investigative work. We went up on a wiretap, tied it all together.
You were a member of the SWAT at the 1993 Branch Davidian siege in Waco, Texas, and you were there for 51 days. What do you think they need to do to recover from this and gain the credibility again?
Like a business, it's critical to have a good reputation. I hope we can recover from it.
Do you still follow the news of what's going on or no?
You know, certain things are stressful to watch. Some of the footage of the rioting and looting hits close to home. And I was a SWAT guy. I love this shit.
Could George Floyd's event have been prevented?
I think with a lot of these cops who really go bad, it was always something there.
A lot of these guys, cops, are not worried about somebody holding them accountable.
So the question is, how did we get here? How did we get to where every small town police department has fancy tactical stuff? They fuel the narrative of defunding the police.
So today my guest is Chris Graham. Let me kind of set this up so you know how this thing works out. So imagine you wake up, you go to college, you get out of college, you become an accountant, and you've taken the safe route. And then all of a sudden an event happens in your life that you decide to go from being an accountant to an FBI agent. And then you do that for 26 years. And then you become a SWAT. And then you work undercover. You do all these other crazy projects we'll talk about. And then one day you're a supervisor in Jacksonville working as an FBI agent for white collar crimes. And you get a call. An informant calls in and says, hey, I think you guys got to look into what's going on with McDonald's. And they say, what do you mean? There's this guy named Jerry Jacobson who apparently has taken $24 million, swindled $24 million over a 24-year period with the old McDonald's Monopoly game. And that leads to a six episode series on HBO called McMillions. And today we're talking to the main character named Chris Graham that's going to unpack this for us. And I don't know if he's going to inspire some of you guys to want to be FBI agents, or some of you guys may never go back to McDonald's, but we're going to find out the story here. So Chris, thank you so much for being a guest on Valuetainment.
Awesome. Thanks. Honored to be here. Thrilled.
So first of all, why from accountant to FBI? I mean, what happened there?
Yeah, you know, that's a great question. And I appreciate you asking it, because unlike a lot of young people today, when I went to college, this was in 1980, early 80s. If you remember, the economy sucked. I mean, especially coming out of the 70s. And if you needed to get a job, I wasn't going to college to experience anything other than getting some piece of paper that would land me a job. And at the time, being an accountant was a way to do it. I got out very easy. It seemed, you know, that it came naturally. Took the CPA, passed it, blah, blah, blah. Walked into work at a Big 8 accounting firm. It was Big 8 back in the day. And I would tell you, by lunch on the first day, I knew I hated it. I was miserable and I needed to get out and do something else. So being whatever, you know, stuck with it for 3-4 years. And at the time, the FBI was looking at and hiring a lot of accountants, a lot more than usual, because of the savings and loan crisis in the late 80s. And I had some friends who had kind of left, went into the FBI, and it intrigued me, and it sort of fit. You know, one thing led to the other, and, you know, I still remember first day showing up at the academy at Quantico and just feeling, you know, this is it. It fits. I was right at home. So, and then, you know, looking back now, 26 years goes by fast. Looking back on it now and looking at all the experiences and things, and, you know, I'm looking at like plaques I have on the wall from this experience, that experience. You know, I consider myself one of the most lucky people on earth to have stumbled into that. And, you know, now now can sit back and relive some glory days.
Yeah. But that's the greatest part about it. There was a book that was written, the first Apple book that was written, the story of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, was called The Accidental Millionaire. And they wrote another book about Zuckerberg that started Facebook, The Accidental Billionaire. If you ever write a book, you should title it The Accidental FBI Agent.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, frankly, growing up around DC, which I did, government employees didn't have a great reputation. So going that direction was completely against my parents' wishes and some others. So, but you're right, accidental, just happened to be lucky and watch the bank robbery happen once, and that's all it took.
I don't think a lot's changed since the time you were growing up to now with Comey and McCabe and what's going on today. How FBI agents are seen. I don't think FBI agents have the kind of trust and credibility they had a long time ago. It's a very weird time right now with FBI agents. It's
a damn shame. And we'll come back to McDonald's because, or McMillions, I want to talk about that. But I'm glad you asked about the image and then and now. And like any business, the FBI is a brand and an image. And when I started and throughout my career, we relied on that image to get access, to get somebody to talk to you, to knock on a door and you're standing there in a suit and people are going to tell you things because they believe, rightly or wrongly, they believe in the professionalism of the agency, the trust, the things like that. And it was critical. We couldn't do the job otherwise. I'm not gonna dive into who's right, who's wrong, Comey, McCabe, all that jazz. It's a damn shame. It has tarnished the reputation and the brand. That's going to take it's going to take years to overcome it. And I will kind of dive into it a little bit. Every time the Bureau has had a significant national embarrassment or a problem like this, not every time, but most of them, if you go back and look, most often it has happened when higher ups at headquarters who are in the ivory tower of headquarters and believe they still can work cases and believe that they're smarter than everybody else. And maybe they are, but smart is only part of the equation to get a case done. Every one of those, or almost every one of those, has been the result of headquarters taking over control and trying to run a case. And that's what went on with not so much Comey was the director, but McCabe, Strzok, and all that. And plenty of agents have a lot more intimate knowledge about that than I do. But that's kind of the big thing. And the reputation, like I said, it's like a business. It's critical to have a good reputation. I hope we can recover from it. So
I hope so as well.
That's my 2 cents.
I hope so as well, because just yesterday, and I know this isn't you, former CIA officer charged with spying for China, CIA, that's yesterday. And then 38 minutes ago, former FBI attorney pleads guilty in Durham probe. I don't know if you just saw this.
Yeah.
This just came out right now. The Justice Department unusual promoted and so investigation links between Trump campaign and Russia netted its first guilty plea Wednesday as former FBI attorney Kevin Kleinsmith admitted to altering an email used to seek surveillance warrants against former Trump campaign advisor Carter Page. I mean, this is some ugly stuff going on in these agencies. What do you think they need to do to recover from this and gain the credibility again? The trust.
There's no magic bullet. I mean, it's just it's stay the hell out of national scandals, highlight the good work, the great. I mean, that's what we try to do with McMillions, and I know we'll keep coming back to that, but I think one of the focuses of McMillions was to highlight a case that was a success, and that the agents involved weren't egotistical assholes, and things worked the way they should. That's what it's going to take. It's going to take dozens and dozens of those cases. Going back to the FBI attorney, though, I'll kind of defend. When you hear FBI attorney, that's usually a career attorney who's come in as a civilian. I don't know this, but I'm 95% sure it's not an agent. So the agent ranks that's your career. That's all you do. You don't move in and out. You don't join a law firm. That's what you do. So, but you're right. I mean, the case, the CIA case yesterday, this one today, it's almost every week we have one of these, and it's like bad cops. I mean, you got 90. I heard you say on one of your recent talks that the bad cops are 1%, 99% are good people. Well, that 1% impacts dramatically the other 99% who are trying to do and generally do the right thing. So,
okay, so it's crazy you're saying that. When you're talking about the good agents and what they're doing. I remember a long time ago, a friend of mine, he and I met when I got out of the military. He went and became a cop, and he says, "Pat, I got to tell you, this badge and this gun that I carry and I walk into a restaurant changes me. It changes people." I said, "What do you mean?" Because I saw him went from being a nice guy, got along with everybody, and then he started snapping in restaurants, started losing his cool all the time. I'm like, what is wrong with this guy? And eventually he lost his job. He lost his badge. They took everything away from him. I said, what happened here? He said it does something to you. The badge and the gun does something to you. So, I hope there is a resolution to do something, because I do think there is a need for these organizations out there to do what they're doing. I just don't think there's any need for manipulation, which is what's happened a little bit lately. So yeah. Chris, here's your resume. You were a member of the SWAT at the 1993 Branch Davidian siege in Waco, Texas, which we talked about. Gary Nestor, we had it on. You were there for 51 days. You've been deployed to Egypt and later chosen to open the first, I believe, FBI office in Milan, Italy, handling FBI operations there for 3 years, which I'm sure you had a good time in Italy. You conducted dozens of interviews with detained Al-Qaeda and Taliban leaders and operatives, which maybe we'll get to that here in a minute. But out of all these crazy things you've done, I think we have to talk about McDonald's first. For whatever reason, that one's getting the most attention. So this phone call comes in from the informant to kind of walk us through what really happened. Was it McDonald's? I heard it was really a marketing agency, and McDonald had no clue what was going on. It was more on this end. Walk us through with what happened there.
Yeah. So you're right, and ultimately it was an agency, a marketing agency, but we didn't know that at the time. Nor do we know the name of the person who was doing this crime. So let's just kind of put it in perspective here. I've got a squad of 10, 12 agents, and we're working high priority white collar stuff, which is police corruption and healthcare fraud, which was a big problem back then. We get a call from an informant to one of the guys on my squad and says, guess what? McDonald's Monopoly games are corrupted. There's a guy named Uncle Jerry who's arranging for winners and stealing the pieces. And has been going on forever. So easy enough to say, all right, well, what's this guy's motive? I mean, this is kind of ridiculous. How could McDonald's let this happen? But it's to me, it's kind of one of these things that if it's true, you can't ignore it. You have to, it may be a remote chance, but I've got to run this down. So we start getting some basic information, some names of some winners. It all checks out. The informant gave us a couple of names of winners. Turns out these winners, we were able to associate them in terms of addresses and friends and relatives. That's right away. Now statistically, it's impossible. It's starting to check out. A lot of just, and we can talk about, traditional police work, but a lot of, or investigative work, a lot of just nose to the grindstone investigative work that went on for a couple of months, looking at phone records, making the connections, doing the charts, etc. We came to a point where we had to make a decision to contact McDonald's and bring them in, not knowing a whole lot of details, not knowing if McDonald's is involved, if somebody on their staff's involved, etc. The reason we had to bring them in, the main reason, there was not a lot of reasons, but we needed to get lists of winners. We needed their cooperation. And ultimately, we wanted to go up on a wiretap, a Title III wiretap. Well, if you think about it, the games are historical. They're past. So somebody's won, they've claimed their prize, and it's over. There's nothing going on anymore. By that time, we had made some connections through phone records between winners, between what I call middlemen, and a main guy named Jerry Jacobson, who, you mentioned earlier, he was the mastermind behind this. He didn't work for McDonald's. He worked for a company called Simon Marketing. But again, we still don't really know the connections between him and McDonald's folks. But back to my point. So we've got to prove up this case currently. Historical records are great, but they're not gonna get us there per se. It's gonna take forever. We want McDonald's to run the game again, but for them to run it, why is the FBI telling you, hey, we need you to run this game, and we need to be talking to you when you're running the game? In the context of that, they know there's a problem. The games have been compromised. So if you're a risk management person or an executive at McDonald's, you are now confronted with what I think it's a horrible decision. It's like what's the least worst answer? Do we tell the FBI, no way, take a hike, we can't stomach this risk, knowing that the case is probably not going to go away. We may run with it anyway, and McDonald's gets named as they're not cooperating, or we cooperate and we get in bed with them and we got to live with the consequences. And they did the latter, thankfully, and to their credit, because they paid the consequences later on with public relations, with lawsuits, etc. But we couldn't have done this without McDonald's. I said in the show, I think we expected an immediate answer. We brought him down to Jacksonville. We had him in the conference room, all the executives, and we said, hey, here's the case, here's all the stuff we got. We need you to run the game again. And we thought, well, of course, they're going to say, yeah, why wouldn't they? We're the FBI. Our reputation was still pretty good back then. They're going to say yes. Well, they were kind of like, well, we gotta talk about this. And off they went. They got on planes and went back. And we were a little perplexed. Now I see, working in the corporate world, I see that was a massive decision that went all the way up to their CEO, who, again, I think made the right decision. We went up on a wiretap, recorded incredible phone calls, tied it all together. We did some undercover work, which I'll get into in a minute. But we were even able to tell McDonald's before the last winner, the winner that claimed it during the game they were running, knowing it was compromised. We were able to tell McDonald's, you're going to get a call from a guy named Brown in Texas who's going to claim to be the winner, a couple of days before he did. We knew that because we were listening on the phone calls, and we heard the passage. We actually were able to surveil the passage of the stolen piece. That's how it, that's Jacobson was, and I won't get into all the details, but Jacobson had figured out a way to essentially shoplift the winning piece en route where he was going to theoretically place it into circulation, and he would switch them out, put a shitty one for French fries and where the winning one was supposed to be, hang on to the winning one, and then recruit one of his middlemen to find a winner who could be trusted, and the piece would get passed. We were actually able to surveil, based on what we had learned on the wiretap, surveil Jacobson meet with Dwight Baker, who's named in this thing, in the parking lot, and our pilot saw him pass the envelope in the parking lot, and then ultimately we know Baker passed it on to another guy who passed it on to the winner. So big success, a lot of fun. Cases don't always. We had a lot of laughs with this case, and you can, because nobody's dying, and we had some fun with it. We ran an undercover operation as part of it, which we called the reunion of past winners. So we want to get winners from, hey, Pat, you won back in 1999, and we want to get you to tell your story again, because it's such a great story, and we're going to host a reunion of winners in Vegas. It's all going to be paid for. We're going to have you in a big conference room.
Brilliant.
You're going to tell your story, but in order to do that, we're going to record you right now. It's going to go on a big screen, and tell us again how you won. So we did a lot of that, got a lot of these people locked into lies about how they won. We created a production company. It was called Shamrock Productions. And the byline was, because you're just lucky, which it's a little bit of little bit of tongue-in-cheek humor there, but that was the kind of, that was the kind of thing. And then what happened? So big takedown, national takedown. John Ashcroft presented in front of national media. It was a story all over the weekend. Actually, it was August, I think 21st, 2001. It was still kind of a story. They were rolling up indictments and ultimately a lot more indictments. But we all know what happened on September 11th, and that changed everything. And the dozens of agents who were working this went down to the two guys who had to carry it through and the prosecutor. And no one heard the story until 2-3 years ago. I got contacted by James Hernandez, who was one of the executive producers of McMillions, and he had kind of stumbled on the story and started doing some research and felt it was a great story. I thought personally, I was glad to talk about it because it was always one of these stories you would tell at a cocktail hour or something. Somebody's usually FBI, they're like, hey, tell me a great FBI story. And you need something to kind of prompt it. And I would always go to McDonald's. I would say, have you ate at McDonald's lately? Yeah, of course. All right, let me tell you about that. So I was always telling the story, but no one believed it. They would, oh, come on, that's bullshit. You're exaggerating, Chris. To have James and those guys dig into it was really fortuitous. I thought they'll get an hour-long documentary, true crime thing on it. They did a phenomenal job digging in, finding a lot more information, victims, personal stories, other subjects that it wasn't really.
What was the
relevant.
craziest part they found that you didn't know about? You're like, holy shit, what was this all about? What was the craziest thing that you found out through them, not you?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. There's about 4 or 5 things. If you watch it, there was a lot of Jerrys running around. So we had 2 they kept talking about Uncle Jerry, and there was a guy named Jerry Colombo, big heavy Italian guy who was married to Robin Colombo. And if you watch McMillions, she's a character. I mean, she's you just got to see it. I can't even describe her. She was married to him. He claimed to be a big OC guy, claimed he was connected with some families, and everybody assumed, well, that's Uncle Jerry. That's Uncle Jerry. Well, we eventually figured out that there was Jerry Colombo, and then there was Jerry Jacobson, and they met through what we believe, some organized crime connection. Jerry Colombo died in a car crash, and there's some suspicious circumstances about that. But they and when I say they, I mean James and Brian, the producers, and their research team. They got in and they dug up archive video about how Jerry Colombo was running a strip joint up in South Carolina, that he was all over the news, that they were going to close it down. He was going around and around with city council, and he renamed it as a church. So it was the Church of the Fuzzy Bunny or something like that, and he was able to stay open. That was just these like little things that, you know what? Frankly, Pat, I'm glad we didn't stumble on that stuff during the case, because it would have diverted us. We would have been spending too much time. Well, someone's got to go. Hey, somebody's got to drive up to South Carolina and check out this Fuzzy Bunny thing, and we'd have never got to the finish line.
Yeah, you wouldn't have. It would have been a distraction.
Yeah.
Depending on the quality of the bunnies they had. But going back to it, so you're seeing these stories, and is it true that Jerry, the main guy, ended up being in the McDonald commercial? Was he in the commercial himself? I saw something with one of the Jerrys being in a commercial, in a video.
It was the big Jerry. It was Colombo. He was, I forget where it was. That was another thing that they dug up. No, Jacobson, the main guy, kept a low profile. And if you watch it, or I'm sure the listeners watched it, remember Jacobson was a former cop from South Florida, and went out on some quote unquote disability, moved up to Atlanta, but he kept a pretty low profile up there. The other one, the Jerry Colombo, was all over. He was all over the media.
Now, where is the connection with a Mormon? I heard something about the Mormon connection to this. What does that have to do with McDonald's?
So Dwight Baker, who was one of Jacobson's main we called them middlemen or recruiters. So when you put this thing, we would put it on a chart, and in the middle you've got Jacobson, and you have lines going out to the recruiters and the middlemen, because Jacobson never dealt directly with the winners. Obviously, that's, if you're a drug dealer, you're the main kingpin. You don't want to deal with a guy on the street. You want people in the middle to distance yourself. So Baker was one of the most recent, let's say at the time, recruiters, middlemen, happened to live very close to Jacobson in South Carolina. They were, of all places, Fairplay. That was the name of the town they lived in. I mean, you couldn't make this shit up. I mean, we just kept stumbling on how in the world, what's the chances of the main subjects of this scam that's all about honesty and integrity living in a town called Fairplay, South Carolina? But but I digress. But he was an elder in the Mormon church, and I think it was, ended up, I'm not sure, you either get excommunicated or something. He's in the McMillions film. Hey, I will say, this is, I said when I got on this, I said, I'm going to be as candid and give my opinions freely. There's a couple guys in that. Dwight Baker is one, and the other one, George Chandler, who was his adopted son. He was a winner. George Chandler was a winner, and Dwight Baker gave him the $1 million piece. Neither of these guys needed the money, first of all. If you listen to them, they are in this, and they really are working hard to make themselves seem, sympathetic, honorable, not quite innocent, but pretty damn close to it. Especially Chandler. I got no room for that. These guys knew what they were doing. If nothing else, they might not have known, and this goes true for any of the winners. They might not have known that there was a Jerry Jacobson up there who was stealing the pieces, and this is who he works, and blah, blah, blah. Most of them got stories that, hey, I got a friend who got this piece, and he's going through a bad divorce, and the wife can't know about it. So you take it, you claim it, and you get $100,000, and give us the rest of the money. Well, okay, that's, you're screwing somebody in that deal. You're screwing the ex-wife or somebody. So this bit about this was all on the up and up. I'm not buying it. There was a woman, and she's in the series, Gloria Brown, African American lady in Jacksonville, was friends of Robin Colombo. She was $1 million winner. She got a fraction of the money. They made her pay a bunch up front, blah, blah, blah. She got charged. Well, she didn't have the funds to hire a big high-priced lawyer. She got the public defender. They pled her like 50. We had 52 some odd people in the ultimate indictment. Most of them pled guilty, all but about 6. George Chandler did not, and went to trial with an expensive attorney because he could afford it. To me, there's some inequity there. And, I think, if people are watching it, it goes to your point. You can't paint everybody with the same brush. There were different, if anybody was close to innocent in this, it was the people, the Gloria Browns of the world. So anyway, that's you guys can.
Do you think they're ever going to bring that game back? Because I can tell you, for me, as a marketing campaign, it was genius. Because I remember as a kid, I worked at Burger King. So it was kind of like, well, I'm about to go to McDonald's because I'm going to get these pieces. And they were sitting on our desk and we're collecting them. It's like, what do you have? What do you have? And it was always funny because you would bring your pieces to school and there was always one piece everybody was missing. There was always one piece everybody was missing.
It was Boardwalk or Park Place. One of them was always, no one could get it.
Yeah. We were missing those two. And like, hey, what if we team up together? And what if we come together? Now we realize all those young 12, 13, 14-year-old kids' dreams were crushed by this Jerry guy that we couldn't find those pieces. But give us one last crazy story until we get to the next one here. What's another crazy findings you saw that happened with this that will shock the hell out of the rest of us?
Yeah, I think they found. I don't know if it shocks the hell out of us. Well, no, I'll give you 2 of them. So if you watch it, so Doug Matthews, who everybody loves, he was the agent who worked on it, and he's still on the job. He's he's on film and he's quite the character. Gets away with some F-bombs and all kinds of other stuff. And I knew he was a character. I didn't know he was quite the on-screen ham as he's turned out to be. So again, that was kind of cool. But no, and then, the producers found Jacobson's son, who was estranged, interviewed him. He had nothing good to say about him. Things like that. They took a case and made a story out of it, and that was cool. That was cool. And there's a corporate side to it too. So you've got, I've seen some interviews with the producers. I think McDonald's had another hard decision about whether to participate in the filming and production of McMillions. Again, here's this nightmare of theirs from 20 years ago. Hopefully it's all been forgotten, and now it's come back, and holy shit, HBO is going to do a story on it. Wow, that's so.
But the biggest part for me to forgive them, which in my mind I was kind of like, well, what is wrong with McDonald's? And then it wasn't us. We hired a marketing agency. We have no clue what's going on over there. Then as a consumer, I'm like, you know what, you can't, because as somebody that runs a company, I've hired marketing agencies. And one time I hired this one marketing agency for Instagram, made all these promises 6 years ago. And I'll never forget, it was myself and a local pastor in LA. We were pretty much using the same guy. And they had this machine that they were doing that was liking pictures. And all of a sudden, the hashtags they had that was liking pictures, here's a pastor getting criticism for liking pictures of nude women and men and weird random things. We're like, wait a minute, we have no idea what's going on. We hired a marketing agency. So it was a very funny yet weird situation because you still had to explain yourself. So for me on the McDonald's side, I'm like, listen, if you hired a marketing agency, I can see how something like this could happen. It was a brilliant marketing campaign, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, their revenue would skyrocket when they ran these games. They're upfront about that. It was a game changer, quote unquote, a game changer on the revenue side.
Chris, what's the craziest thing you've done in your a lot of different things? If you were to say, interviewing dozens of detained Al Qaeda and Taliban leaders, what was that like?
And I won't get into names and where, but here's what I would say. And I thought about this.
Are they names that we should know?
Yes. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Right. In places you'd know too.
Okay.
But one of the things, and I thought about this listening to Gravano, and I've thought about this too in terms of interviewing some like Al Qaeda leader types, and that is, had these guys wound up working for Legg Mason or a big firm or a company, AT&T, they would have rose to the top in those organizations as leaders, because that's how they are. They're brilliant, engaging, smart people who just have a natural tendency to lead, whether you're in Al Qaeda or you're in La Cosa Nostra or, on the good side of the law, the CEO of the company. That was always, I came away a few times from interviews like that thinking, wow, that guy, it's a damn shame. It's a damn shame he wound up where he's at now, because, a couple of good breaks, he very easily would have, could have led, Saudi Aramco or something. It's
interesting.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Can you give me okay, go to the person that you think about without giving a name, and what was impressive about him when you sat down with him?
I think just not just his history, but the fortitude in terms of overcoming hardships, like bad hardships, bad treatment, keeping, maybe keeping some degree of sanity, engaging, very astute to where we were coming from, questions, funny, sense of humor at times, which, it counts for a lot. I just, you could just tell. And I think you notice this with like a Gravano or these guys who rose to the top of an organization that a lot of people get killed along the way, rising to the top. If you're stupid, bad things happen to you, or you get ostracized. Same thing.
When
So
you interviewed these guys, were you on their turf or were they on our turf?
they're on our turf.
They're on our turf when you interviewed them.
Yeah.
And is this after they got caught, or is this nothing's happened yet and they were willing to sit down with you?
You know, I've done both.
Okay.
I've had the the pleasure to do, or pleasure, the whatever you want to call it, the opportunity to do a little of both, and yeah, no shit. There's others out there who are, maniacal savages, and they're where they are. But yeah,
interesting. Very interesting. Being where you are right now, watching, do you still follow the news of what's going on, or no? Are you following everything, or not really, not at the pace you did before?
I probably follow it. I'm selective about it. So like what kind of, I'm conscious and cautious enough about what I watch to know that, certain things are stressful to watch and taxing and don't add to learning.
Now watch. What do you not watch?
I think, so I work in corporate security now for a mall company. So some of the footage of the rioting and looting hits close to home. It really does. And, we've lived that and continue to live it. So, and by watch, I'm talking about not just TV, but social media. So, I think some of, some video footage where you're getting part of the story or it's being spun a certain way, I'm cautious about that. And I think you brought it up on one of your earlier talks. You got to consider who's, the motives of people behind this. So I think you said, doesn't it make sense that China benefits or Russia benefits or the Middle East benefits from, these scenes of chaos in the street? Hey, it's going on, and that's unfortunate, but riling people up in an emotional state by watching it on a screen hundreds of miles away doesn't really help the problem. And it's certain. And I'm selfish. I'm always looking out for my well-being, and it doesn't do me any good to walk out of the room with high blood pressure because of something I saw.
Makes sense. As an FBI agent yourself, what are your thoughts about this whole defunding police situation where, you're getting commissioners that are resigning, and you're getting Patrick J. Lynch, president of the New York Union, is coming out and saying for the first time ever, we're coming out publicly and saying we're supporting Trump. And it's a very weird dynamic where, some are being criticized, some, Seattle's just deciding to fully defund and go a complete different direction. What do you think about what's going on there?
Yeah, no, it's incredibly complicated. Obviously, blanket calls to defund the police are, are reactionary. I mean, do we want New York to return to the way it was in 1974? No, I don't. I don't think anybody would agree with that. I think changes probably need to be made. Here's where I'll go with this, and I made some notes to talk about it. One of the things, let me kind of go back and I'll tell you kind of where I'm going with this. So 2015, we had the tragic shooting in San Bernardino at it was like a community center. Guy was a terrorist, and him and his wife had been back and forth to Pakistan a few times. Mm-hmm. Terrible shooting, right? 14, 15 people killed, the worst of the worst. I'm watching it on the news. It's over, right? They caught the guy. He's down on the highway somewhere. The guys the police officers who stopped him were, patrol guys, highway patrol guys. They end up in a shootout with him. The footage on TV is dozens, if not hundreds, of fully armed SWAT guys walking up and down the streets of San Bernardino with long guns, with all the equipment, with all the fancy gear, with the armored trucks, all that shit. So keep that in mind. I ran a JTTF, a Joint Terrorism Task Force, for last 10, 12 years of my career. And the thing that's missing in that image of the San Bernardino is you've got all these guys and millions of dollars of equipment thrown at something that having them all out there after the fact doesn't prevent it. What would have prevented it? You got to ask yourself, where could we have spent those resources to potentially prevent that? And it's not, and I was a SWAT guy. I love this shit. I mean, I lived it. I was into the scene, hey man, run, shoot, jump, work out, get paid for it? Man, that's a great deal. Get fancy equipment. It's almost like in the FBI, it's like in high school, right? There's, extracurricular activities, and then there's the guys on the football team, and they're the SWAT guys, right? So, you got a little bit of that. So I was there. I get it. And I understand the need. But looking at it from a law enforcement executive or a manager, all those millions of dollars for sexy and fancy equipment, wouldn't it have been better to go into the salaries and of analysts and software and the intelligence work, paying informants, all that stuff that is not sexy? It's boring as hell. Many times it doesn't pan out to anything. You may prevent things you don't even know you've prevented them. And I know we've done that just by having a presence, interviewing somebody through some intelligence. So this goes to my point, the broader point, which we see today, and that's this. You hear this concept; it's kind of come into vogue lately. I'd like to think I was one of the pioneers of thinking about it. Not that I raised my voice about it, but this militarization of police, and you see it now where you've got it drives a wedge in a community where you have what looks to be an occupying military force. Now, no doubt about it, you need to have SWAT teams here and there in big cities, deal with an active shooter, etc. But and so the question is, how did we get here? How did we get to where every small town police department has an armored vehicle and a team with long guns and maybe a helicopter and all kinds of other, again, fancy tactical stuff? And I can't take credit for this. It's coming from a guy named Radley Balco, who wrote a book. It's called, The Rise of the Warrior Cop. And he points to the funding, two sources. Military surplus stuff under a program. It was a 1033 program where state and local law enforcement could go to the military and say, hey, we need an armored vehicle. You got any extra ones? Well, yeah, we just brought a whole bunch of them back from Iraq. So take it and run with it. So now they got an armored vehicle. They might get other stuff. And then post 9/11, DHS funding grants to have this kind of preparation. And if you're given the choice, you're running a small police department and you've got, you might be a sheriff or something, and you've got voters, you're trying to impress city council, you're going to spend that money on a fancy team that can rappel out of helicopters, even though you're never going to use them. Or I'm going to hire 3 kids with PhDs in computer science and analytical intelligence to grind through records, or I'm going to hire investigators or agents who are adept at working informants, who might have the language, who can get into these groups. That's where I think we've reached that point. And, and to the broader point, I think that those images of fully armed police departments have been they've been counterproductive. They fuel the narrative of defunding the police. So, by the way, I like what you're saying. A lot of people are not going to agree with me, but it's fine. I understand. That's the whole reason why we're having a conversation. I'm reading a book right now called "The Man Who Saw the Market: How Jim Simmons Launched the Quant Revolution." The guy's worth about $24 billion. And when he came out, he started a company and hired, I think he was working for some university, and he ended up hiring the best mathematicians in America and eventually in the world. And he brought them together, and eventually he started a firm, and he brought all these mathematicians to study the market, to see what happens with the trends. Then he figured out a formula. I think he ended up averaging 65% return over a 20-year period, which is insane to be thinking about that kind of a money. And no wonder he's worth $24 billion today. But he hired mathematicians. A lot of that today is predictive analytics. So what you're saying today makes a lot of sense on
making those investments to see if that can be prevented. Here's a follow-up question to you. Could George Floyd's event have been prevented? Could that have been prevented?
Yeah. I mean, I think the obvious, and I'm just kind of parroting, things I've heard and read, throw maybe a little common sense on it. You've got an officer who has a history of discipline problems. I've heard people say, and even good friends of mine who, we've talked, and they're on the other side of this issue, and they say there's a thin blue line. There's a blue line of silence. So you see maybe a little bit of that with these other officers putting up with George. What's his, not Floyd? What's the officer's name? I forget.
Derek? Are you talking about Derek?
Derek, yeah, Derek. So they put up with him. They know he's a hothead. They know he's a problem, and they choose. Hey, we got to go. We got to get along. We're all part of the same team here, and we're not going to say or do anything because that's just not what we do. That, how do you break that? Well, and I'm not holding the FBI up as an example, but within the FBI, if you are aware of misconduct by somebody, or they violated some policy procedure, they're violated a computer thing, or they're acting out, there's something wrong, and it blows up into an issue, a disciplinary issue or something like that, and the investigation, the internal, determines that, hey, Chris Graham, you knew that Pat had a habit of really yelling at people, and he hit this person once on the back of the head during an interview. You were there. That's against policy. You saw it. You didn't do anything. Guess what? You're in just as much, maybe not in as much trouble, but now your career is on the line. And I think some police departments have variations of that, but you've got to make it so, and you take the personality out of it. So if I could say to you, all right, hey Pat, I had to tell them what I saw. It's not personal. I don't have, but I got to look out for my career. I can't, I got a family to feed.
But then you're a snitch if you do that, right?
Well,
so then
I know, but you got to take it out of that. You've got to make it, hey, I didn't want you call me a snitch. The agency, the same agency we both work for, the same agency that pays our salary, put these requirements on me just like they put them on you. If you saw something, I expect you to say about me.
Yeah, how much sensitivity is there? How you see these movies, and in the movies they show a bad cop, two bad cops, and a good cop. The two bad cops go and rob a guy of cocaine and $200,000 of cash, and they decide to split it, and the third guy doesn't want to take it. He's like, dude, I don't want to have anything to do with this. You almost see the other two guys doing whatever they can to put this guy out, and they're worried about him being a snitch, and his career is pretty much done.
Right.
So there's the pressure of almost not accepting. Now, this is Hollywood, so I'm not in the world to know what happens. It almost seems like there's pressure for the good cop to also participate in the bad behavior, because if you don't, it can end up, turning on you, and you got a reputation coming back. So I guess what I'm trying to ask here is, so we have Derek Chauvin, right? The guy who put the knee on George's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. What do you do to see these trends and say, listen, because I'm telling you, this friend of mine was the calmest guy. We'd go to nightclubs. He would talk to girls like this. Hey, what's your name? So this. And he was so smooth. He was so chill. He was the calmest guy I knew. When he became a cop, then all of a sudden he went more like this and like this. And one day we went out, started telling people off, hey, bitch. Hey, bitch. I'm like, never seen you talk like this before. What happened to you? And I sat him down one day. I said, listen, I'm going to tell you something. I'm a little concerned about you. He said, why is that? I said, I don't know what the hell is going on with you, but you acting like the world owes you something. And he got emotional. He said, Pat, I'm telling you, this badge and this gun is doing something. Now, this is coming from a guy that was in the military for 3 years, 101st Airborne Division, had a assault weapon, had an M16. I mean, I'm telling you from a guy who was in the military. But I saw it did something to some people. How do you control and be able to read somebody about to go the direction of being a bad cop, bad agent? How do you catch that? What are some signs to look for?
Well, I got to ask you, you've known this guy. You said you knew him before he was a cop.
Oh yeah. Nicest guy in the
There
world.
there was nothing in his
Nothing,
personality.
nothing. He was a sweetheart from a loving family. Mom and dad never got a divorce. My parents got a divorce. So you could have seen my temper and said, well, it comes from his this. But nothing. Was raised in America, went to a nice school, had a brother. They got along. He was with the same girl since he was 16 years old. Nothing happened with them. He loved her. She loved him. They eventually, what the streak of how in 5 years, boom, like this. I couldn't understand it.
I'd hopefully like to think he's just the anomaly, and that,
So what you're saying, so based on what you're saying, you're making me think that a lot of the part of having a Derek Chauvin is in the hiring process and in the background check. Is that where you're going?
It's both,
okay.
right?
Okay.
So you weed them out in the hiring process. A lot of these, they do psych tests, things like that. I think some of these background, the background stuff's usually pretty cursory, right? I mean, they're not getting into, hey, Pat, you knew this guy in middle school. Did he ever get in a fight? What do you remember about that? That kind of background.
So fair enough. So what questions give you red flags? So ask me the questions. What are some of the questions that would give you a good scoring on your end to say predictive analytics? Why this guy, we can't hire this guy. This guy's a little bit of a loose cannon.
I've watched some of your interviews, and you probably should have been an FBI agent, because you do a great job of two things, right? You have your facts, but you listen, and often it's an open-ended question. So, I mean, I can't off the top of my head come up with like specific background questions, but if I'm doing a background on Derek Chauvin, he's ready to get into the police department, and you're his best friend. You've known him for forever. You went to high school together. I'm using this hypothetically. I'm going to ask you, just talk about him. Tell me about him. And, he played linebacker. Tell me about how he played, and just try to work off of that and get bits and pieces into a personality. And hopefully something comes out. Not always it does. I mean, your friend's a classic example. I mean, something must have happened on the job, or there was something latent in there. I think many of these guys, there was always clues. It's just like, it's like when somebody turns out to be a pedophile or something, somebody shoots something up, people come out, oh, well, yeah, there was always something a little, if you really press it, there was something about that guy. I think with a lot of these cops who really go bad, it was always something there. Now, that said, I've had friends, and the job changes them. There's no doubt about that, you work in a difficult environment where the community does not like you, and you are a sign of bad things. I mean, when I get nervous now. I get nervous when I get pulled over, and I got no reason to. It's not, so you're people involved in that environment. It takes a toll on people, and it's how they deal with it. And
Chris, is there tenure in PD and FBI and all of that, all those different organizations? Is there such a thing as a tenure, or no?
Most police departments, they have some, but not. I think it varies. It varies from department to department. I mean, I know guys who are still police officers into their, late 50s and 60s. FBI, you're out the door. You're out the door at 57, and you're.
No. What I'm asking is like a tenure model of, how teachers after 10 years, they can't get fired, and you have to like really a 42-year-old teacher has to, make a pass at a 16-year-old boy or girl to get fired. Is there tenures in PD and in FBI?
Well, a lot of the PDs, remember, are union. So the rank and file patrol officers have union protections. So that's effectively, the same as tenure.
So that, first of all, this brings up the negative power of union and negative effects of union. Because for me, like, I look at some teachers, okay, you see these videos of some teachers that got terrible attitude towards kids, but there's nothing you can do about them. You can't fire them because they have tenure. I think one of the best things that there is in business is there is no tenure. If you're in a company, you screw up in your 12th year, you can get fired, you know?
Yeah.
I'm a CEO of a good-sized company. If I mess up, I'm fired. It doesn't matter what I do. I can be fired as a CEO. And I think that element of not having to fear cops, teachers, fire, you know, FBI agents, not having that fear of, dude, if I screw up, I could get fired. Oh, I'm locked in. We're good. I can go around and push people around. The way it's also set up in the comp structure and the way it's set up with the protection for them, I also think there's an element of it where for me, it's kind of like nowadays, you know, cops are going around working with criminals and they're doing their job. Some cases they're doing their job and they're the ones constantly being held accountable rather than the other way around. So there's a fear of, dude, I don't even want to do anything because they're going to say racism or I'm going to get arrested. But I think there's also the other part where the way the format is set up with accountability, a lot of these guys, cops are, you know, not worried about somebody holding them accountable.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, I think that's one of a number of factors. Leadership, you know, the culture and leadership within a department makes a big difference. Back to the Derek Chauvin and Floyd. One of the things that, and I just happen to remember this, I want to bring it up. You know, they worked at a nightclub together, right? I haven't really scrubbed into that, but you know, Floyd was doing security there. Derek was doing off-duty police work. Guys I know who are, you know, a good friend of mine, NYPD detectives, Washington D.C. They will tell you that is a venue for trouble for a law enforcement officer, is those kind of nightclubs, because, you know, first of all, you're getting paid. You're usually getting paid pretty good to sit outside in your patrol car or stand at the door. There's, you know, you find me a club like that where there's not some illegal activity going on, where there's not some drug dealing and some prostitution going on, you got to look the other way. It is an environment that, you know, that sucks people in. You know, if it's an adult entertainment, if it's a strip joint, there's young strippers around, guys get tangled up in there. So I just think, and, you know, maybe I'm wrong, I just wonder, you know, what kind of history did those two have back, you know, from back at that club? Was there a beef over, you know, over a drug deal? Was there a beef over, you know, some girl somebody was screwing? I don't know, but I just know from watching it firsthand and plenty of friends who are cops, nightclubs, strip clubs, those kind of places put a cop in a bad position.
Yeah, that makes sense. Final question, and before we wrap up, Chris, what's your biggest concern right now with the current climate we have in America?
You know, I've used this before, and people ask me, hey, what do you think of what's going on? And I say, if somebody asked you, and this is extreme, I get it, but if somebody asked you 20 years now, if somebody asked you 10 years ago, what does revolution look like? What would revolution today look like to you? Name 5 things that would entail revolution. I mean, it's not like the Revolutionary War where they got the red coats and we're fighting it out over, you know, Bunker Hill or anything like that. But name 5 things. You would have, you know, deep racial divisions, rioting, looting, protests, false information, narratives, media split down the middle, groups occupying zones, and an unwillingness of authorities to either deal with them or an inability to deal with them. My guess is, if I had asked somebody that question, you know, 10 years ago, they probably would have named a few of those things and maybe something else. And I'd say, well, now what do we have? We have some or all of those things going on. It's pretty damn scary because, you know, revolution is a strong word. So I'm there's part of me that's optimistic. I mean, you know, there's always things always seem to work out, but this just seems tough. You know, I think I've even had conversations with people who, and I'm not politically leaning big time one way or the other. I think I'm probably part of the big bell curve in the middle, but I am former law enforcement, and I lean that way, where I've had conversations that have, my intent was to, let's find a middle ground here. Let's, we're friends. We can talk through this. I've walked away feeling pretty shitty about it, because they didn't go well. That to me that's really concerning, that, that people who, family members even, that have, bound by blood or been friends forever, that these conversations, that they can't, that people have conversations and people leave upset. I kind of worked my way into your answer there. The answer. Well, that's what concerns me.
That makes sense. I mean, it is weird times. It's divisive. It seems like there's two gangs, but if you look at the numbers, 42% of Republicans are not going to move. They're going to vote right. 44% of Democrats are not going to move. They're going to vote left. 4% of the Green and the Libertarians are going to stick to their guns. That's about 90%. It's the 10% that's going to elect the next president. That's simple as that. It's the 10% of America right now that's going to elect either Biden and Kamala or Trump and Pence.
And that, tell me who you think that 10% is. Who are, because I'm probably in there somewhere. I think you're probably in there, based on which I don't know you well, but based on what you're saying is you're probably a center-right person. You're probably somebody that's center-right. I'm military. I'm also center-right myself. But that 10%, you got the entrepreneurs who may be socially left, but economically they're conservative. Okay, so they're going to be kind of sitting there saying, let's see what's going to be happening over here. You got the, the baby boomers who may be socially conservative, but economically a little bit liberal, because they need the Medicare, Medi-Cal, they need the health, they need all that other stuff. So they may vote for somebody that's going to take care of their health insurance. So that's a big audience with baby boomers, 76 million of them. You have, the folks who don't follow any politics and could care less, but they're willing to vote, and they're just kind of going to vote, quite frankly, on the simplest thing, like who they like more. And it's not even that complicated. But that 10% is going to determine our next president. And that next president, the next 4 years, one is planning on taking capital gains to 15%, which is Trump. Mm-hmm. And the other one is going to plan on taking taxes to a whole different level, at a higher level. So economically, who that's going to hurt and who that's going to benefit. And one just said the other day to Cardi B that he wants to make college free for any family making less than $125,000 a year income for their kids, which that's 90% of them. Mm-hmm. And taxes are going to be going up the way we're going. Right? It's such a dramatically, like when Bill Clinton became president, I voted for him. He's the first president I shook hands with. I'm like, dude, okay. He's a capitalist. This is him and Newt made it work similar to what Reagan and Tip O'Neill made it work. Reagan and Tip O'Neill, two Irishmen, would go out and hash it out and come back and come up with something, and they would talk shit to each other privately and publicly, but they figured things out. Things kind of cleared up. Right now, it's very weird. It's very, very weird. Yeah.
Where we are today. So I don't know what's going to happen. We will see. My goal today, my main outcome of this entire interview was one thing. My goal was for you and I to be able to solve every single problem in the world. I think we failed. So I don't think we solved every problem in the world, but I think we're starting the conversation, and people can start having a conversation with each other, hopefully in a civil manner, so we can get some more clarity. But Chris, thank you so much for taking the time, for being a guest over here with us. How can people find you, by the way? What is it? Should we just put the link to drive it to your website, or what would you like people to come and get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I have a sort of a website, and it's more of a hobby, fun. It's called gmanresources.com. You can put it up there. Talks a little bit about me. Lean more on the entertainment side, what I'm doing and working on, a couple of projects that hopefully will be entertaining. Maybe not so much as McMillions, but worth watching. It's got some stuff about my story that I wrote over time, and wrote that more to answer, people ask, hey, what about the FBI? What was it like? I'm like, well, just read the my story part. I try to make it a little entertaining and fun, but I'm around. I'm on LinkedIn.
We're going to put all those links below. Look, if you're subtly dropping a marketing campaign or alluding to a new documentary coming up about the Church of the Fuzzy Bunny, I'm sure there's going to be a big audience that's going to want to learn more about the Church of the Fuzzy Bunny. But if it's just other things, we're going to put the link below to your site. Yeah. We're also going to put the link below to McMillions. So if you haven't seen it, it's on HBO. You can go watch that as well, the 6th series of that documentary with McMillions. And aside from that, Chris, thank you so much for being a guest on Valuetainment. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, likewise, Patrick. I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me. Look forward to talking again soon.
Anytime. Take care.
McMillions, huh? One guy named Jerry takes down $24 million over 12 years with this monopoly game that McDonald's comes out with. And this 26-year FBI agent, very, very interesting stories to be thinking about. If you enjoyed today's interview with Chris, there's 2 other interviews I want you to watch. One is with Joe Pistone, a.k.a. Donnie Brasco. If you've seen the movie, if you've never watched this interview, he's the one that took down 5 families, and he was an informant. He was an insider for undercover for 6 years. And the other one is an interview I did with another FBI agent, McGowan, who went up and negotiated with the Sinaloa cartel. And his stories are crazy on a whole different side. If you want to listen to this, click over here. If you want to listen to Joe Pistone, click over here. And if you've not subscribed to the channel, please do so. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.